Coming up on today's show, we're going to react to ESPN's Matt Miller's 2-round mock draft and see who he had the Falcons taking. But quick self-plug, because we are less than 100 subs away from reaching 19,000 subscribers. And after that, it's the big 2-0. So make sure you hit the sub button down below if you have not already. Welcome into Falcons Today by Chat Sports. Matthew Peterson here, reacting to ESPN's 2-round mock draft, which has 2 picks for the Atlanta Falcons. Now, some quick house rules before we get into this, because we've done lots of draft content on this channel already, and the comment section is usually filled with people very upset that this mock draft doesn't have a pick at their preferred position of need. Ladies and gentlemen, it is February. A lot's going to change between now and April. So free agency is going to take place, and that's going to fulfill and satisfy a lot of Atlanta's needs. So if you're pissed off that the Falcons don't go edge at pick number 8, well, Atlanta may very well sign a guy like Josh Allen or Brian Birds in free agency, and then they don't have to go edge at number 8. So put your pitchforks down about the Falcons not selecting the position you wanted. And also keep in mind, there are guys who get picked before the Falcons at number 8 that you may want, but they're not available. So with that, let's jump into it. First overall, no surprise in my opinion, Caleb Williams to the Chicago Bears. And then Drake May goes number 2 to the Commies. Jaden Daniels goes number 3 to the Patriots. So if you wanted one of those 3 quarterbacks, they are long gone by the time Atlanta's on the clock. Now, this is where things get a little bit more interesting in my opinion. Marvin Harrison at number 4 is the right pick for the Cardinals. The Chargers go Malik Neighbors at number 5. I feel like if everything goes to the script, the Chargers are the first somewhat wild card team picking at that spot. Then we got the Giants, who are a true wild card. They could go a handful of directions at number 6, but they go Rome Odunze. So we see the top 3 quarterbacks go, and then the top 3 wide receivers, which means after Joe Alt goes to the Titans at number 7, the Falcons go with the first defensive player off the board, which is Terrion Arnold. So if you wanted a wide receiver, the top 3 guys are already gone. So let's get to know Terrion Arnold a little bit before we really start breaking down this draft pick. He's 6 feet tall, 196 pounds. He was like a 1.5, 2-year starter. He started his entire 2023 season and played a lot in 2022. He was a first-team All-American and second-team All-SEC player this past season. Now, he's primarily an outside corner. He's got good length at 6 feet tall. He doesn't have insane burst or speed or twitchiness. He's got good fluidity in his hips, but he's not a slot corner. He's an outside corner. And the goal here, or at least the thinking is, you pair A.J. Terrell with another great corner, and you create a no-fly zone in the NFC South. Now, obviously, a lot's going to change between now and the end of April, and the Falcons, I wouldn't say hopefully have a quarterback, because I'm definitely open to them getting a quarterback in the draft, depending on who that is. But whatever happens at the QB decision or QB position before the draft will dramatically impact this 8th overall pick, right? If the Falcons trade for Justin Fields, well, they're not going to use that 8th overall pick to maybe try and trade up and get a quarterback, or maybe try and reach on a Bo Nix, Michael Penix, or J.J. McCarthy. So if you're upset they didn't get quarterback at number 8, for starters, the top 3 guys are already gone, but also a lot can change between now and the draft that will impact that number 8 selection. But if we're just looking at this through the eyes of best player available, I like this pick. I think Terrion Arnold is going to be a really good cornerback for some team. And in the top 10, you need to make sure you make that pick count. He had 12 pass breakups last year for the Crimson Tide, 5 interceptions. And Atlanta does have a need at cornerback because Jeff Okudah is currently slated to be a free agent. Now, of course, like I said earlier, if Atlanta re-signs Jeff Okudah, I don't think the Falcons are going to have cornerback at the top of their needs when they're on the clock at number 8. So obviously this is a very fluid discussion and things are going to change over the next couple of weeks. But let's get to know Terrion Arnold a little bit better, because here's what Matt Miller had to say about this selection. It's a little too early for Michigan's J.J. McCarthy or any other passer, and I still think we'll see Atlanta get in on Fields or Russell Wilson given the offensive talent on the roster. So instead, the first defender comes off the board with this pick. Arnold is a physical, feisty cornerback with great speed and the quickness to stick with receivers no matter the route. The Falcons have a star in A.J. Terrell, and pairing them together could give the Falcons the league's best cornerback duo. So now I want to get your opinion on this selection. How would you grade it? If this was the pick, A, B, C, D, or F, just ignore what you think the Falcons' biggest needs are. Just the overall thought of drafting Terrion Arnold. Is that a player you are on board with bringing down to ATL? Let me know. A, B, C, D, or F. I know a lot of you are already being keyboard warriors in the comments section saying, no, we needed an edge rusher. We needed an edge rusher. And I hear you. The Falcons need an edge rusher. There is no doubt about that. But when you're picking top 10, you should not strive or aim to pick top 10 very often, if ever. So when you are in the top 10, you got to make that pick count. You've got to get a guy that you know is going to be a surefire thing. And when you look at Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 big board for all players, Terrion Arnold is number 6 on his list. Now, there are some good edge rushers in this class. I like Dallas Turner. I like Jared Verse, right? Liatu Lutu out of UCLA, or Liatu Latu, excuse me. Chop Robinson out of Penn State. But when Arnold is way ahead of a lot of those other guys, I'm interested in top 10 selections being home run picks. Not, well, we like Arnold more than Jared Verse, but we need an edge rusher. What's going to happen if you go with Jared Verse and Arnold goes on to be a Pro Bowl cornerback, and then 2 years from now, Atlanta still needs an edge rusher, and they also now need a cornerback because they just went with need over best player available. My draft mantra is unless you need a quarterback, like the Commanders or the Patriots, and you're picking top 3, the top 10 picks in the draft should be best player available over need. You might not need that position at this moment, but rosters change very quickly. And you're going to look back and go, I can't believe Atlanta passed on this great player. I'm not saying that's going to be Terrion Arnold for sure, but they passed on this great guy because, oh yeah, that's the year the Falcons needed an edge rusher really badly, and they didn't pick this future all-pro wide receiver. If you're picking top 10, you have more than just one need, right? You have a lot of things go wrong if you are picking top 10, and the Falcons have more than just a need at edge rusher. So like I said earlier, things can change throughout free agency, but I'm interested in picking best player available in the top 10, and then we'll figure out what the Falcons' biggest needs are moving forward. All right, next up, we're going to look at Atlanta's round 2 selection from Matt Miller. But first, a quick shout out to our sponsor today, which is Prize Picks. We've got the big game coming up on Sunday, and I don't want you guys to miss out on all the fun we're having over at Prize Picks, because all you do is pick 2 to 6 players, then choose more or less on their projected stats. Now, if that sounds like a whole bunch of confusing jargon to you, let me break it down in very simple terms. I'm taking the more on Patrick Mahomes' passing yards at 0.5. That's what Prize Picks is doing for all users. Patrick Mahomes, 0.5 passing yards. So you know that one is going to hit. I know I'm not supposed to say that, but I'm just going to say it. So at that point, you just got to make one more selection. And you go 1 for 1, 1 free throw, and you are home free. So I like the more on Isaiah Pacheco at half a rushing plus receiving touchdown. And then I like the more on Brock Purdy at 248.5 passing yards. So if you like my selections, feel free to ride with me at prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS. And for all of the boys watching with a significant other, if your girlfriend, fiance, or wife is more interested in the commercials than the game, my free tip would be make these selections for them on Prize Picks, and then they are locked in for all 4 quarters because they've got some skin in the game. So go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. Let's fast forward to round number 2. So we start round number 2 off with the Panthers making their first selection. They go Ladd McConkey, wide receiver out of Georgia. Now, I'm also going to give you guys a free little draft fact right here because When you look at the draft order, it's not the same, right? Why are the Commanders picking after the Patriots and Cardinals when they were second in the first round? The way the draft order works is the draft order is determined by record. After that, if you have tiebreakers, the first and only tiebreaker is strength of schedule. And the easier strength of schedule you had, the earlier you select. Now, there were a handful of teams last season who finished 7-10. The Falcons had the easiest strength of schedule, meaning of all the 7-10 teams, Atlanta had the easiest schedule and still finished with the worst record. So the way it works is in round one, early or worst, or I beg your pardon, easiest strength of schedule drafts first when you're doing a tiebreaker. And then when you move to round 2 and round 3 and round 4, I'm trying to make this as concise as possible. Whichever team was selecting first in round 1, in this case Atlanta, of all the 7-10 teams, they move to the back of the line of the 7-win teams. And everyone moves up a spot. And then when we get to round 3, whoever was the first 7-win team to pick in round 2, they go to the back of the line, and everyone moves up a spot. So I hope that answers some confusion as to why is Atlanta picking ahead of all those teams in round 1 and then behind all those teams in round 2. We get that? I hope so. I know it's a bit confusing. Okay, let's move on with the mock draft, though. So getting closer and closer to pick number 43 here, we see Michael Penix go, pick number 42, a quarterback to the Minnesota Vikings. And at pick 43, the Atlanta Falcons, they select Devontez Walker, or Tez Walker, wide receiver out of University of North Carolina. So let's get to know Tez Walker a little bit, and then we'll talk about whether or not this is a good selection for Terry Fontenot. He is 6'2", 200 pounds, so a good size frame, but he runs like a bat out of hell. You don't find 6'2", 200-pound receivers who are as fast as 5'11", 180-pound receivers, right? And that's not a very fair or very common size to speed ratio, which is why everyone is drooling over the one-year guy out of UNC. He started off in the MAC. He was at Kent State, so for all my MAC brothers and sisters who watch football on Wednesday, this name might sound familiar. Then he transferred to UNC. The NCAA, this one's for you because they made him sit out for the first couple of weeks for no good reason, and then they finally allowed him to play football, and he had a really good season with the Tar Heels. Now, he did struggle at the Senior Bowl, but in 8 games he caught 699 yards, 7 touchdowns, an average of 17 yards a pop. So the guy is a vertical playmaker. He can stretch the field. And that would be a nice addition to the Atlanta wide receiver room, which is very lonely at the moment. But let's read what Matt Miller had to say about Tez Walker. Walker has great power in his route tree and an ability to run through contact both before and after the catch. The Falcons need a vertical threat opposite London, and Walker would bring that to the table immediately. So Drake London, like I mentioned, he's the only wide receiver under contract in 2024 that ended the year on the Falcons active roster last season. Matt Collins, Van Jefferson, Scotty Miller, Kadir Hodge, all free agents. So the entire wide receiver room after wide receiver 1 needs rebuilding completely, and a draft is, of course, a great way to do that. When it comes to Tez Walker specifically as the pick, I've got my concerns. Very small sample size. He played 8 games, and that's not his own fault, right? That's just the NCAA sucking as they always do. But 8 games is a risky pick when that's all you've got to work with. Just 8 games of tape. I know he played at Kent State as well, but 8 games going up against some really good corners in the ACC. Plus, he had a really bad Senior Bowl. And I don't think the Senior Bowl is the end-all, be-all. Like, they played a whole bunch of games before that. 1 week in the Reese's Senior Bowl should not dictate whether or not you're a good or bad player. But you put those two together, and I walk away thinking, let someone else take that risk, right? Like, he might turn out to be a really good player. He's got excellent size and excellent speed, but I just don't know if that's worthy of a second-round pick. Second-round picks, you don't have to bat 1,000, but you got to have a pretty good on-base percentage. So here's some other round 2 wide receivers I think worth looking at. You've got a pair of Texas Longhorns. Keon Coleman's kind of flirting between round 1 and round number 2. Ladd McConkey, he flew up the charts after his excellent Senior Bowl performance. And then you've got the Oregon wide receiver, Troy Franklin. Troy Franklin would be my preference. In fact, he went one pick after Tez Walker did in that ESPN or in this ESPN mock draft. But I'm a big fan of Troy Franklin. We've got the productivity, 1,300 yards, 14 touchdowns. He's got excellent speed, great size at 6'3". I think this would complement Drake London very well. This would be my preferred pick over Tez Walker. So name a random Falcons wide receiver for me. I love, you love, all of us love doing name a random blank. So name a random Falcons wide receiver. I don't want to see any Julio Joneses in the comment section. I don't want to see any Roddy Whites. The more random, the better. All right, that will do it for us on this edition of Falcons Today. I really appreciate everyone who tunes into our content. You really help support the channel. You have no idea how instrumental you are to our growth over the last couple of months. If you have not hopped aboard yet, consider subscribing today.